Internet ko eh. Then, we can start with in fact, si Charles Edward Jeanneret, or Le Corbusier is the last among the planners within the City Beautiful movement. So, okay. So you can see on the slide, he's known is otherwise known as the Le Corbusier. So he's more famous actually in that name. So he was a Swiss French architect, and as I mentioned earlier, the last of the City Beautiful movement planners. Okay. Many of his ideas, particularly from his book Urbanisme, shaped modern city planning concepts, and his influence is still very much felt in today's urban landscapes. Le Corbusier had strong ideas about how to address urban congestion. He believed that the solution lay in building high-rise towers on small plots of land. Essentially, he promoted vertical development to counteract the density of urban centers. So this view aligned with this concept of rational city planning where large-scale planning was key. He envisioned cities where congestion would be eliminated by segregating different urban functions such as living, working, and leisure into separate discrete zones. So a core concept of his vision was to eliminate congested streets, sidewalks, and even untidy neighborhoods. He imagined cities where hygienic, regimented, high-rise towers would be surrounded by park-like landscapes. This idea of urban cleanliness and orderliness in the built environment became central to modernist thinking in city planning. However, his ideas were far from universally accepted. Um, and one of his more provocative statements, you can see there, by this, okay, it's in the third bullet. By this immense step in evolution, so brutal and so overwhelming, we burn our bridges and break with the past. This hints at his disregard for heritage conservation. He believed that to build for the future, planners needed to cut ties with historical precedents. This approach understandably drew criticism, especially in regions where cultural preservation was considered vital. So Le Corbusier's ambition was to increase circulation and open up space in cities. He envisioned wide highways and broad avenues, making cities more navigable and less congested. But while he focused on architecture and aesthetics, especially the Cubist movement with its sharp geometric lines, he faced criticism for overlooking the sociological and cultural needs of local populations. Critics argue that his designs were sometimes more concerned with how things looked rather than addressing the real complex problems faced by urban residents. So this brings us to a paradox that Le Corbusier was often criticized for. While his goal was to decongest cities, his proposed solutions of highly density housing and massive highways often had the opposite effect. That's creating congestion instead of alleviating it. Okay, so probably we can go to the next slide. Still on Le Corbusier. Okay, next slide, Jen. Okay. So it's quite slow. Please be patient. Yeah, just let me know kapag ano ha, if I'm choppy so that I can change again to another internet connection. So we're using two Wi-Fi actually, but we're in the 37th floor and not really getting the correct and not really having a fast connection over here. Mm, okay. So you can see Lou Corbusier's Radiant City. This is a modernist vision for urban density. So he called it Le Ville Radius. Um, it presents an ambitious attempt to rethink the modern city. His objective was simple yet profound. That's to decongest cities by concentrating populations in highly dense vertical structures. So please remember this one, okay? The level reduced, that's to decongest cities by concentrating populations in highly dense vertical structures. This radical idea was aimed at accommodating urban growth while avoiding the sprawl that plagued industrial cities at that time. So, what are the key concepts in Lou Corbusier's Radiant City? Of course, number one, increasing density without congestion. And so he proposed concentrating people in uniform 60-story tower blocks. Okay. These structures were designed to house large populations up to 3 million people, but arranged in a way that maintained ample open space between buildings, creating a park-like environment. Another key concept is functional zoning and modern technology, which means his city was divided into zones um, for living, working, and recreation. So the high-rise buildings designed with flat roofs and clean box-like forms reflect the minimalist and functional aesthetic of modern architecture. Another key concept is maximizing sunlight and green spaces. This is one of Luc Corbusier's innovations was ensuring that these towers were placed strategically to maximize sunlight exposure, crucial for the residents' health and well-being. This design also emphasized the integration of green spaces within the urban fabric. Then another key concept is waterfronts for recreation and culture. So in the Radiant City, the waterfronts would not be industrial wastelands, but spaces for stadiums, museums, and recreational facilities, contributing to both the physical and cultural life of the city. Also, Lou Corbusier's ideas heavily influenced the design of modern central business districts. So that's one of the key concept. That's modern CBD, characterized by clusters of skyscrapers and high-rise office buildings. The introduction of automobile and highways as core elements of city planning further shaped the urban experience, marking a significant shift towards modernism. So, Le Corbusier's Radiant City embodied the spirit of modernism with its focus on technology, efficiency, and abstraction in urban design, being abstract. His vision set the stage for the development of contemporary cityscapes dominated by high rises and planned green spaces, though some criticize its overly uniform approach, which lacked human scale interaction and spontaneity. And so we can go to the next slide, still on the Radiant City or Le Ville Radius. That's the next slide. Uh, okay. Le Corbusier's Radiant City embodies, so this is continuation, a radical departure from traditional urban planning. His design, initially presented as une ville contemporaine, which means contemporary city, in 1923, imagined a modernist city. I already mentioned 60-story tower blocks set within green gardens capable of housing 3 million people. So this vision sought to address the growing urban congestion by proposing vertical living as a solution. It includes yeah, uniformity and large scale buildings, which means the radiant city would consist of tower blocks in a park-like environment. I think this is just a repetition of what I just mentioned. However, the strict uniformity and focus on efficiency led to criticism. Cities like Chandigarh in India and Brazil implemented aspects of Le Corbusier's concepts, but his designs were often criticized for being rigid, authoritarian, and devoid of human scale. So, what was its impact on other cities? Le Corbusier's ideas heavily influenced urban planning in cities like Boston, Toronto, and New York. However, in practice, the concept was often found to be socially and economically isolating, lacking consideration for the complexity of human interactions, transportation, and social services. So, as many of these visions became reality, Le Corbusier's plans faced backlash. Number one, um, critics pointed out that the emphasis on standardized architecture and wide open spaces felt inhuman and removed a sense of community. Also, the design left little room for spontaneous, unplanned social interactions. It also lacked human scale elements such that the large expanses between buildings created a disorienting environment, making these spaces feel hostile rather than welcoming. So in the US, elements of Le Corbusier's urban design philosophy manifested in the public housing projects and tenement blocks. These mega projects, rather than solving urban issues, often led to the breakdown of the urban fabric, contributing to social isolation and crime. Today, many of these housing blocks are being dismantled to make way for more integrated, livable neighborhoods. So a significant lesson modern planners have taken from the Radiant City concept is that urban success relies on combining different functions and activities, not separating them. So contemporary planning, like this one, the contemporary city concept of Le Corbusier, encourages a mixture of residential and um yeah, commercial spaces, aiming for vibrant and walkable cities, unlike the contemporary city concept of Le Corbusier. But now we define contemporary planning as aiming for vibrant and walkable communities where history and modernity can coexist. Because yeah, he had that um concept about, yeah, I read earlier about breaking, burning bridges and breaking with the past. So heritage conservation was a big no for Le Corbusier. So maybe we can go to the next one. Still, but I think it's the same content except for I think I mentioned about tenements already, so maybe you can proceed to the next one, Jen. The next slide. No, I'm still seeing the pink one. Okay, that's the one. Um, so Le Corbusier's designs were ambitious, I mentioned earlier, aiming to reorganize the chaos of urban life through strict functional zoning and modern high-density structures. So while his principles worked well for temporary uses like hotels, his approach proved unsuitable for permanent residential communities. So why did this model fail for permanent living? Number one, it's the high-rise structures separated people from the street and each other. This meaning between individuals, among members of the communities. So this lack of engagement with the surrounding community created a sense of isolation, detaching residents from the vibrant and organic street life below. Okay. Also, Corbusier's idea of highly controlled environment lacked flexibility for the dynamic, diverse needs of everyday residents. The uniformity and sterility of the design made it impractical for long-term living, leading to dissatisfaction and social issues in urban settings. So you can also see here in the second half of the photos, tenement housing and the breakdown of American communities from 1912 to 1960. So in America, Corbusier's ideas inspired the design of public housing projects, the tenements, especially in major cities like New York and Chicago. And so these large scale housing developments were seen as the solution to urban overcrowding, but they quickly devolved into symbols of urban decay and social breakdown. So the tenement projects replicated Corbusier's emphasis on efficiency and high density, but failed to incorporate the human elements that make a city thrive, such as interaction, community spaces, and mixed-use areas. This led to social fragmentation, with residents feeling increasingly disconnected. Okay, you can also see here the Black Americans and Latinos occupy Harlem, New York City, and later the ghettos in Bronx, which were former quarters of Jewish minority who have become increasingly rich. So it means that they ended up in these poorly designed tenements, when the Black Americans and Latinos migrated to Harlem and the Bronx in New York. So the lack of opportunities and inadequate urban planning contributed to the rise of these ghettos, where social inequality became more entrenched. These areas, once home to Jewish immigrants, had become overcrowded and segregated, contributing to urban blight. So what started as a vision for modern living eventually became a failure of public housing policy. And the once promising tenements deteriorated due to poor maintenance, lack of community investment, and rising crime rates. So today, you can also see many of these structures, especially in Philippines, which have been demolished and giving way to more human-centered urban designs, but still there are a lot that are existing, especially the medium-rise buildings that, like, especially those run parallel to the uh PNR lines, isn't it? You can see in Manila. So in this context, we can see how Corbusier's model, while ideal for short-term functional use, fell short of creating sustainable long-term communities. So it reminds us that urban planning needs to prioritize both the physical and social well-being of its residents, ensuring that design serves people, not just architectural ideals. So we can go to the next one, next slide. Mm, it's still the okay. Now it's moving. Yeah, modernism in architecture emerged as a radical departure from traditional styles. That's why it was called a paradigm shift in design, uh, referring to architectural modernism, with an emphasis on function and innovation. So the core characteristics of modernist architecture can be understood through two main lenses. First, uh, aesthetic and form, and then the next one is morphological characteristics of modernist buildings. But let's start with aesthetics and form. Okay, you can see some concepts there. Rejection, okay, rejected historic. Just a moment. Rejected historic precedent as a source of architectural inspiration. So, what do we mean by this one? That modernism turned away from historical styles, prioritizing functionality over ornamental design. The idea was that form should follow function. All right, meaning that the purpose of a building dictated its appearance. Another one is buildings became expressions of their use. In modernism, architectural was no longer about decorative facades, but about expressing the purpose of the structure in its most essential form. And also, still under aesthetics and form, the rapid development of new materials and technologies during the Industrial Revolution played a key role in shaping modernist architecture. Steel, concrete, and glass were used in new ways, enabling larger, taller, and more open structures. So, one of the two main lenses. And so the next one is morphological characteristics of modernist building. So, um, first is style-free plan universals with interiors free from unnecessary walls. Again, it's saying your internet connection is unstable. I hope you can hear me. Just let me know if not clear. Okay, the design of spaces was flexible and adaptable with interiors free from unnecessary walls or decorations, allowing for open, functional environments. So other characteristics, okay, the development of the steel frame allowed walls to be freed from their traditional role as load-bearing elements, leading to new possibilities in building design and cantilevers. Of course, this was during that time, okay, but we have all this today, but of course, because we're talking about history. So buildings were designed with overhanging hanging sections that were supported at only one end, showcasing the structural capabilities of modern materials. So you can see where it began, right? So during that time, and then glass became a prominent material in modernist design, creating transparency and light-filled spaces. So concrete allowed for bold, clean lines and a sleek, modern look. So, if you would be asked later in your board exam, uh, yeah, where or what what's that first skyscraper, or maybe they would ask which year was that. So in 1885, the home insurance building in Chicago marked a significant milestone in modernist architecture because as the world's first skyscraper, it stood 10 stories tall and was made possible by a steel frame and the invention of the elevator. So this breakthrough set the stage for the high-rise architecture that dominates modern cities today. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Okay, let's wait. All right. So this is a photo of Le Corbusier's influence on high-rise socialist housing in formerly communist is Europe. Some uh still still on because it's the work of Le Corbusier. Uh it's particularly influential in the design of high-rise residential complexes in the Soviet Union and other communist countries in Eastern Europe during the post-war era. So these regions adopted his principles to meet the demands of rapid urbanization and housing shortages under socialist regimes. Socialist governments sought to provide housing for the working class population, and Le Corbusier's modernist principles provided a blueprint for large-scale state-sponsored residential projects. So also, if you look at that picture, and of course, I need to mention that um, among these features of socialist housing inspired by Le Corbusier is the high-rise apartment blocks. These buildings are often arranged in repetitive patterns to maximize density while providing communal open space between them. And then, like Corbusier's original plans, socialist planners include green zones between the buildings for recreation and public gatherings. So these spaces were intended to foster a sense of community and to speed up construction and reduce cost. Many of these housing complexes were built using prefabricated concrete panels. So what else? Okay. Yeah, that prefab, that was a method that allowed for rapid replication of the same building design. So this mirrored Le Corbusier's vision of mass-produced, standardized housing units. So also the designs were austere and practical. Okay, in line with the modernist ethos of function over form. Apartments were designed for efficient living, often with little ornamentation. So what was the impact on Eastern Europe? While these large housing estates provided homes for millions, they also became emblematic of the failures of mass-produced housing in socialite regimes, and that over time, many of these areas fell into disrepair due to a lack of resources for proper maintenance. Although intended to offer a better quality of life, these massive high-rise estates were often criticized for their inhuman skills, lack of individuality, social isolation. So instead of promoting community, sometimes exacerbated feelings of alienation among residents. So okay, we can go. Let's see what's the next slide after that. The Brasilia, right? The next slide. Okay. Now plan for what's the next slide. Check it out. That's Brasilia. Um Brasilia is the capital city of Brazil. It's one of the most iconic examples of modernist city planning and real world attempt at creating a radiant city following the ideals of Le Corbusier. And this was designed by Lucio Costa and architect Oscar Niemeyer. Brasilia, I think I mentioned this last time already. But this was constructed with the goal of symbolizing a new modern Brazil. So the city is renowned for its distinct architectural style, innovative urban planning, and futuristic design. So, what was the radiant city concept envisioned by Le Corbusier aimed at decongesting cities by concentrating populations, isn't it? That's the characteristic. So also Costa and Niemeyer drew inspiration from this model, envisioning Brasilia as a planned city that would break away from traditional urban sprawl and instead create a modern, functional city layout. So I thought I was okay. Anyway, there's the National Congress. That's one of the most recognizable buildings in Brasilia, okay, which houses Brazil's legislative body. So the structure features two towering office blocks there, flanked by two distinctive semi-spherical buildings. Can you see? And one housing the Senate and the other chamber of deputies. So the clean, minimal lines of this building showcased modernist architectural principles with a focus on form and function, mirroring the ideals of Le Corbusier. Also, the Plaza of the Three Powers. So, what do you mean? Do you have idea if we say Plaza of the Three Powers? It means that it depicts three branches of Brazil's government, just like Philippines, the executive, the legislative and judicial. So this that yeah, it's a symbolic representation of Brazil's democratic structure. It's actually like Philippines, right? That we have three distinct three branches with distinct powers. So emphasizes large Corbusier's urban planning ideals, allowing for public gatherings while maintaining a sense of grandeur. So there's also Our Lady Aparecida Metropolitan Cathedral. Where's the cathedral there? Okay. You see how unique it is. So this was designed by Oscar Niemeyer. This striking cathedral is one of the most famous landmarks in Brasilia. Its hyperbolic structure with 16 concrete columns reaching skyward creates an awe-inspiring effect. And the design is both innovative and symbolic, representing Brazil's modernism and religious faith. So, the Presidential Palace of the Dome, Palacio de Alvorada, the official residence of the President of Brazil. So this palace is another example of modernist architecture at its finest. The building features elegant curves and pillars, showcasing the mayor's signature style of combining functional structures with aesthetic grace. So, but it did not escape from challenges of creating a radiant city in Brasilia. It came at a huge financial and environmental cost. I mean, the creation of Brasilia itself and the city's construction required vast resources and large swaths of forest were cleared to accommodate the modernist vision of urban living. So despite its futuristic layout, Brasilia's planning and construction led to significant deforestation in the Brazilian highlands, raising concerns about the environmental sustainability of such projects. Although Brasilia was a bold attempt to embody the principles of modernist urbanism. It has received mixed reviews over the decades. On one hand, it stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its architectural significance and innovative city planning. On the other hand, critics argue that Brazilia's design lacks human scale and accessibility, as the vast open spaces between buildings originally intended to foster a sense of community have often led to feelings of isolation among residents. Okay, so maybe we can go to the next one. Yeah, okay. I'll introduce New Towns movement. So this will be okay because we need to do new towns. The next slide. Okay. Um, Actually, the new towns from 1920 to 1950s, it was okay. It was a movement that reacted to overcongestion in Le Corbusier's skyscraper city. So it's a response. Okay, okay. The movement was largely a response to the overcongestion in cities like New York and Toronto, which were experiencing the effects of rapid urbanization. The New Towns movement sought to create better communities based on the principles of Ebenezer Howard's Garden City concept, which so we're back to the former, before the Le Corbusier's skyscraper cities or the contemporary city. He had many um yeah, the Le Corbusier's era, I mean, still within the City Beautiful movement. And then it came back, the New Towns movement would like to emulate the Garden City concept of Ebenezer Howard. So primarily to integrate, green spaces and separated pedestrian and motor traffic. So there are six striking principles of the movement. First is, okay, it's interesting. I require each reviewee to, even in the past from 2014 or 15, when I started doing, or mentoring, um, yeah, planners, I would like you to really take it by heart, the six principles of this New Towns movement. Number one, plan simply but comprehensively. So urban planners aim to create clear, organized layouts that could grow sustainably. So second one is provide ample communities use spaces. So for parks, public squares, and community buildings were integral parts of the plan. And then factories and industrial buildings. So it says put factories and other industrial buildings where they can be used without wasteful transportation of people and goods. Okay, so it should be kept strategically to minimize transportation needs. And then cars must be parked and stored, not on the streets. So this to reduce congestion and improve pedestrian safety. And then bring private and public land into relationship. So there should be balance, private and public space. And so the movement advocated for a harmonious relationship between personal and shared spaces. So that's what it means. Arrange for the occupancy of houses. Is it so? Homes should be designed with long-term community residency in mind. Um, I hope you really memorize plan simply but comprehensively. So these six principles of the movement, so that you won't miss anything uh when you finally sit down there as one of the examinees for the 2025 board exam. So we go to the next slide, still on Radburn. So this is really, yeah, a favorite topic, and even in the AICP, American Institute of Certified Planners, um, this is something that, uh, yeah, they don't miss asking about this question about Newtown, about Radburn, New Jersey. So, Radburn, actually, okay, as a city, okay, Radburn was established in 1929 as a planned community in New Jersey. Okay. It was developed by Clarence Stein and Henry Wright. So there are a duo to this development, two prominent architects of the time, and was based on the principles of the Garden City movement, which aimed to create a balance between urban development and natural surroundings. So what was the design principle of Radburn? Radburn is famous for its innovative approach to town planning, all right, especially in how it integrates living spaces with green areas and transportation systems. So what are the key features of Radburn? First, the super blocks. Okay. Radburn introduced the concept of super blocks. This is a large residential block where interior streets are limited to foot traffic and vehicles are rerouted around the block. The design, okay, excuse me, this design promotes a safer and more pedestrian-friendly environment. So another key feature, so that's super block of Radburn. Then separation of cars and pedestrians. One of the most revolutionary ideas in Radburn was this one. Okay, the separation of vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Walkways and footpaths were designed to ensure pedestrians, especially children, did not have to cross busy streets. This was seen as a groundbreaking safety feature at the time. And then there's the third key feature is green spaces. Radburn was designed with large green spaces integrated into the residential layout. These provided residents with easy access to parks and outdoor areas, enhancing the quality of life and creating a sense of community. These green spaces were also meant to improve public health and well-being by encouraging outdoor activities. So that's the third. Okay, the fourth one is cul-de-sacs. As another key feature of Radburn's layout. Okay, the dead-end streets that reduce through traffic in residential areas, further promoting a peaceful and quiet neighborhood. So, okay. Radburn was not just about innovative physical planning, but also about creating a cohesive community. The layout encouraged social interaction and public amenities like schools, parks, and shops were strategically placed within walking distance of the homes. The town was self-contained and aimed to foster a strong community identity. The principles behind Radburn were heavily influenced by Ebenezer Howard's Garden City movement, which advocated for creating self-sustaining communities that combined the benefits of both urban and rural living. So, like Howard's vision, Radburn sought to balance green spaces with residential and commercial development to provide a better quality of life for its inhabitants. So it's a legacy, right? Radburn became a model for suburban planning around the world. Its design principles have been adopted in numerous other planned communities, particularly in the US and Europe. The concept of separating pedestrian paths, from vehicle roads, for instance, has been replicated in modern urban planning efforts aimed at reducing traffic accidents and promoting walkability. Even today, Radburn is studied by urban planners for its forward-thinking approach to community design and its successful integration of nature and urbanity. While Radbarn was innovative, it wasn't without challenges. The community faced difficulties during the Great Depression, and the vision of a fully self-contained town was never fully realized. Additionally, as urban sprawl increased, some of Radburn's planning principles became harder to implement on a larger scale, particularly in denser urban areas. So, um, if you can move to the next slide as our last slide, probably okay, as our last slide for tonight. You can see there, figure 2.9. That was Radbourne, New Jersey. Okay, you remember the duo, Clarence Stein and Henry Wright. That's in 2010. So, these are, yeah, the defining features of Radbourne, New Jersey. Okay. And the red arrows there in the diagram show the paths designated for motor vehicles. These roads were strategically placed around the residential areas to ensure minimal intrusion into pedestrian spaces. And the blue arrow there represent the pedestrian paths, which are completely separate. Okay, let's see. Yeah, separate from vehicular roads, and this design allowed residents to walk through the community without the need to cross busy streets, providing safer, more pleasant walking experience. And the separation between motor traffic and pedestrians was hailed as a significant advancement during that time in suburban planning, and was seen as a model for creating safer neighborhoods. As to the super blocks, yeah, Radburn's layout was designed using super blocks, large blocks of residential housing surrounded by green spaces, and pedestrian paths. So vehicles were routed around the blocks, um, preventing through traffic, okay, from cutting through neighborhoods and making the streets quieter and more pedestrian friendly. And the cul-de-sacs also, there are dead end streets that reduce through traffic in residential areas and further contributed to a peaceful environment. And lastly, green belt and parks, this is another feature of Radburn, which yeah, with ample green spaces which were accessible via pedestrian paths. And these green areas were intended to be communal spaces where residents could go gather, fostering a sense of community. So Radburn's model influenced urban planning across the globe. The idea of separating traffic types to improve safety and quality of life became a guiding principle for suburban developments in the US and beyond. So, okay, so that's all for tonight, and we can have it again tomorrow. We will continue so that we can finish history, so that we can proceed with other theories. So thank you. I hope you